Hello, Sam from Toolhead here today. Today I think we got a pretty good one. I got a 2000 Saturn SL 1.9 liter single overhead cam that stalls intermittently. So when it stalls, it will not restart. It never quits. It never quits while it's idling, and every time I get it back to the shop, it runs fine. Everybody's been here. Everybody knows, this is a pretty difficult one to figure out sometimes. So let's figure a couple things out here real quick. The first one is, I just want you to know that this is my son's car. My grandson rides in this car, and the temperature outside is 0 degrees. So this is high priority for me to make sure that it's fixed properly. So I start with, let's just check for some codes. It's got some codes that I don't know if it's really going to lead us in the direction of where I'm expecting to go. So I got a P0037, bank 2 sensor 2, circuit low voltage. It's got a P0113 IAC high voltage low temperature, a P0300 misfire, a crank variation not learned, and an engine stall detected. Now I did just recently replace some transmission cooler lines on this, and I did kind of glance through a little bit of freeze frame data for a couple of the codes, and I really didn't see anything that was helpful to me. So I make a decision to clear the codes and test drive. This is not typically the way I handle jobs like this. Just so you know, I like to leave the codes in there, but I really need to know if any of these codes are causing my problems. So the P0037 reappears almost instantly. The bank 1 sensor 1 and bank 2 sensor 2, or bank 1 sensor 2 rather, they seem lean. During a rev, you can get them to move. So I'm really not thinking that the action sensors are my problem. The rear one looks like it may be lean, so I don't want to read a whole lot into this yet. The fuel trims are near 0 just before it quits. The short-term fuel trim goes to positive 25 just before it dies. I mean, instant, seconds before it dies. As soon as it dies, I test it for spark and injector pulse, and we all know that we're expecting not to have anything. I have both. The car will start in idle, but as soon as you give it any fuel at all, it falls all over its face. So I tow it back to the shop. It runs fine, so I think, just based on the information I have right now, it's time to put an amp clamp on this fuel pump and put a pressure gauge on. So, a little bit about fuel pump testing. I put a low amp clamp on the fuel pump fuse in the IP fuse box, and since I already got my scope out, I decided to use the WPS 500X for fuel pressure. This isn't normally what I use, but I got the scope out anyway, so might as well use it. And then just for shits and grins, I decided to use channel 3 with secondary lead. Not really expecting anything remarkable with channel 3, just it's there, might as well use it for something. So a couple of lessons on using the amp clamp to test fuel pumps. The amperage is based on the pressure of your system, so if you're using my test results, just understand this vehicle should be 40 to 50 psi, and I'm expecting 6 to 8 amps, mostly because I've tested enough of these systems. I kind of got a pretty good idea what I'm looking for. And the fuel pump should spin around 8,000 RPMs. You'll see here in a minute where I'm going with this. As the fuel pumps wear, the amperage drops low. The restriction causes high amperage, and then a higher RPM indicates that it's sucking air. So these are the kind of the three things I'm looking for when I'm looking at the amp clamp. So here's my amp clamp pattern. Now the vehicle is running properly right now, but as we can see, my fuel pump pressure is the blue line, which is about 37 psi. So it's a little low, but is it enough low to justify doing anything with it? I don't think so. Like I say, I'm expecting 40. 37 is pretty close to 40. So my fuel pump is drawing 6 amps, 6.159 amps at the peak, and it's spinning at 7,420 RPMs. So the RPM is a little low, and the amperage is right at the bottom of what I was expecting. But again, I'm not really overly concerned at this point. The pressure is a little low. Most people know if you work on these Saturns, they'll run down to about 30 psi. So again, I'm not real concerned with the pressure either. So I'd like to stop about this point and figure out, what do I know? I know so far I have an oxygen sensor code. Our amperage is 6.1 amps, which is, like I say, right at the bottom of what I'm expecting. So it indicates the pump is getting some wear. But again, I'm not overly concerned about it. The RPM, 7,420 RPMs. The time between the cursors is 8.086 milliseconds. 60,000 milliseconds in a minute. You divide 60,000 by 8086, you get 7,420 RPMs. The other thing I'm looking for is my pattern. I don't have any flat spots, and I'll be honest with you, typically I would have put the amp clamp on this fuel pump, looked at this information, and I probably would have just moved on to something else. So the secondary pattern does indicate a lean condition to me. It's not getting a good burn, kind of indicates a lean condition, but again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. So I think it's time. Let's see if we can get this car to act up in the driveway. I don't want to tow it back again. I really don't even want to drive it. So I power brake the engine, got the transmission in drive, about 1,500 RPMs. I'm not over stressing the transmission, but I am putting some load on it. And I'm just about ready to give up. Like I said, 0 degrees outside. It is, it's time to go back in the house and figure out what to do now. So then it happens. What happened to my pressure here? My pressure goes right straight to 0. Now, I have a lot of information on this screen. I have 5 seconds per division. So I've got a lot of information on my screen here. So I'm going to zoom in and see if we can see what's going on here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up this file. I've saved it in my Pico. And I'm going to zoom in right here where the pressure dropped to 0. I want to look at the amperage. I want to see what happened when this went to 0. So like I said, I have a lot of information on this screen. So here I'm zoomed in. A couple things you should know. My amperage is down to about 5.9 amps. So my amperage has gone down. And interestingly enough, if you look at my pressure just before it falls, it's actually higher than it was when we tested it originally. I hadn't noticed that originally, but we're more within our spec. And then obviously it falls right off to 0, or almost 0. It does make a jump to 0 there. So our pump did not speed up, so that tells me it's not sucking any air. It might have sped up a little bit, but it's not sufficient to justify that it's sucking air. The amperage did not go way up, so that tells me that there's not a restriction. You know, something's not in the line causing my restriction. And the fact that the amperage dropped down just a little bit indicates to me that my pump is worn. So let's zoom in a little more on the actual humps of the fuel pump. We know the pressure fell to 0, so it's kind of inconsequential, but I wanted you to see that between the 0 gaps, I don't have anything miraculous going on. The amperages went down. So let's look at our pump. Let's really concentrate on the commutators of the pump. So what I decided to do here was I wanted to zoom in just prior to the pressure going to zero. And doing that, you notice a couple of things pretty quickly. First of all, the pattern's not nice and smooth like it was earlier. And what's all these little extra tails going on here? I got one that's almost flat, and then we got all this extra activity going on. So what I do is after the pressure goes to zero there for just that quick millisecond there, you'll notice that the pressure drops off drastically right after that. So let's look there. Maybe that's got a better idea of what's going on for us. So I got a pretty good idea right now that it's going to need a pump, because I don't think it's a restriction. I don't think it's a power problem or ground problem, because our amperage would go way to zero if we were losing power or ground. So I really think it's a pump problem. But let's look at some more pictures here. Let's look and see if we can really see what's going on. This is the area that I've decided to concentrate on here. So I'm going to zoom into this spot right here. This is what I see. You'll notice the pressure is starting to drop just a little bit, but you also notice that I have a lot of uneven activity on my screen. So let's zoom in right here. This is right where our problem is, I believe. So there's a zoom in of it. You can see that the commutators are getting some extra activity going on, almost like the commutators are shorting out or getting a run across them, probably getting hot. So I'm going to zoom in one more time, and this is what they look like. I'm pretty confident this car is getting a pump. I will put an after version up here after the pump is replaced. The pump is on order. Any comment, suggestions prior to pulling the pump, I'm willing to listen to what anybody's got to say. And as always, if you enjoy my videos, please subscribe to my channel. Thumbs ups, thumbs downs. I try to respond to comments in a timely fashion. Have a great day. Please visit our website, toolhutusa.com, for any diagnostics equipment needs you may have.